A mountain collapsed in 45 seconds, and one engineer predicted it 3 weeks before it happened. October 9, 1963. Longarone, northern Italy. Population, 4,600. In 6 minutes, 1,892 of them are dead. The dam is still standing. The dam is still standing. So why is the entire town erased? Here's what they never taught you. Edoardo Semenza saw this coming. He mapped it, he calculated it, he put his name on a report and handed it to the men running this project. They buried it, because being wrong was cheaper than stopping the reservoir. 270 million cubic meters of Monte Toc detach at once, 110 kilometers per hour into the water. The reservoir has nowhere to go, so it goes up, 235 meters. It crests the tallest double-arched dam on Earth and drops as a solid wall. The wave hitting Longarone is 70 meters tall. The town isn't flooded, it's vaporized. Bare bedrock where 4,600 people were living 4 minutes earlier. You need to understand something right now. Every detail of this disaster was predictable. Someone predicted it, and the system crushed that person. Reveal. The question isn't what broke. The question is why the warning was ignored, and what that tells you about every safe system you trust today. That answer is coming. Stay with this. To understand what happened in that valley, you have to understand what the Vajont Dam was built to be. It was, by any measure, an act of national ambition. Post-war Italy needed electricity. SEDE, the Adriatic Electricity Society, needed profit. And Carlo Semenza, chief engineer and Saudi's most celebrated designer, needed a monument. The Vajont Gorge was chosen in 1943. The geology was considered secondary to the vision. By 1957, construction had begun on a double-arch concrete dam that would stand 261 meters tall, at the time the highest of its kind anywhere on Earth. The numbers were staggering. The engineering was genuine. The problem was the mountain above it. In 1959, a geologist named Leopold Müller submitted a technical assessment of the reservoir basin. He had examined the rock formations of Monte Toc, the mountain directly above the planned reservoir on its southern flank. His conclusion was specific and alarming. The basin contained a pre-existing ancient landslide plain, one that water could reactivate. That report was reclassified as internal company property. It did not reach Italian regulatory authorities. Not in 1959, not in 1960, not ever before the disaster. Carlo Semenza had a son. Edoardo Semenza was a geology student at the University of Padua in 1959 when his father asked him to survey the Monte Toc basin for his thesis. It was meant to be academic. What Edoardo found was not academic at all. He identified a massive M-shaped scar on the southern face of Monte Toc, a profile consistent with a prehistoric landslide of enormous scale. He mapped the clay layers beneath the surface, clay that becomes frictionless when saturated with water. He calculated the volume of unstable material at approximately 200 million cubic meters. He presented his findings to SEDE project director Francesco Sensadoni in 1959. Sensadoni did not dispute the geology. He did not commission further study. He told the 22-year-old geologist that the findings were interesting and that he would look into it. The reservoir filling begins in February 1960. The mountain begins moving almost immediately. Monitoring instruments record displacement. The engineers note it. They continue filling. In November 1960, a 700,000 cubic meter section of Monte Toc's lower slope slides into the partially filled reservoir. It generates a 4-meter wave. The wave damages downstream infrastructure. SEDE classifies the incident as a minor operational anomaly. Filling resumes, SEDE did not ignore the mountain's movement. They studied it with considerable technical sophistication. This is the part of the story that makes the disaster so much worse than negligence. They knew exactly what was happening. They were trying to manage it. Between 1960 and 1963, SEDE installed a network of survey markers on Monte Toc's face. They measured displacement rates continuously. They brought in internationally recognized geologists, including Giorgio Dal Piaz and Carlo Caloi, for consultations. They built a physical scale model of the reservoir to test wave dynamics if the slope did eventually fail. The model testing results came back in 1961. They showed that a full slope failure would generate a wave overtopping the dam by 20 to 30 meters. Not cresting it, overtopping it by 20 to 30 meters. The model results were filed internally. They were not shared with the civil engineering authority overseeing the project. They were not shared with the downstream communities. The towns of Longarone, Pirago, Rivalta, Villanova, and Faye had a combined population of over 4,600 people. Not one of them was informed that a hydrodynamic model predicted their potential annihilation. Not one evacuation plan existed. By the autumn of 1963, the displacement readings from Monte Toc survey network told a clear story. The mountain was accelerating. In the spring of 1963, the slope moved approximately 1 centimeter per week. By September, that rate had risen to 1 centimeter per day. In the first week of October, it reached 20 to 30 centimeters per day. SADE's lead engineer on site, Mario Pancini, watched these numbers climb. He was not uninformed. He was not incompetent. He was trapped between what the data said and what the company needed. The dam was the centerpiece of SAD's nationalization valuation. Italy was in the process of nationalizing its electricity sector. The higher SAD's assets were valued, the greater the compensation to its shareholders. A dam rendered unusable by geological instability was worth considerably less. On October 1st, 9 days before the disaster, the Italian Civil Engineering Authority, the Genio Civile, ordered SADE to lower the reservoir level as a precautionary measure. The reservoir was dropped approximately 15 meters over the following days. Lowering the reservoir did not stabilize the slope. The sudden reduction in water pressure along the pre-existing clay failure plain may actually have accelerated its movement. The mountain was already in the final stage of failure. The engineers were adjusting the water level in a syringe while the patient was hemorrhaging. October 9, 1963. The day begins with rain. Heavy, persistent alpine rain that has been falling for several days. Rain penetrating the rock. Rain adding weight. Rain saturating the clay seams that Eduardo Semenza mapped 4 years earlier. By early evening, the displacement readings are beyond anything the monitoring network has previously recorded. At the Vajont Dam site, SADE technicians and the resident civil engineering inspector, Francesco Rittmeyer, are on alert. There is discussion of evacuation. The decision is deferred. The population is not warned. At 10:15 p.m., witnesses in Casso, a village on the cliff above the reservoir's northern edge, positioned high enough to survive, report hearing the mountain, a deep, grinding, tearing sound rising from the southern slope. Not an explosion. A geological groan, the sound of 270 million cubic meters of ancient rock separating from the earth along a clay plain loosened by water. Lights in Longarone below are on. Families are inside, children are in bed. The last train of the evening has just passed through. At 10:39 p.m. and 15 seconds, Monte Toc moves. The landslide takes approximately 45 seconds from initiation to impact. The entire northern face of Monte Toc, a volume of rock 2 kilometers wide, 1.6 kilometers long, and in places 200 meters deep, drops into the reservoir as a single coherent mass. The water in the reservoir cannot compress, it cannot absorb. It transfers the kinetic energy of 270 million cubic meters of rock, moving at 110 kilometers per hour directly into its own mass. The reservoir does not flood, it is physically launched. The wave on the upstream side, away from the dam, climbs 190 meters up the valley walls. It strips the village of Erto to bare rock. On the downstream side, the wave crests the 261-meter dam and drops into the Vajont Gorge. The volume of water overtopping the dam in the first 30 seconds is estimated at 25 to 30 million cubic meters. For reference, Niagara Falls discharges approximately 2,400 cubic meters per second. What crests the Vajont Dam in those 30 seconds is the equivalent of 3.5 hours of Niagara Falls, compressed into half a minute and focused into a gorge 30 meters wide. The dam holds. Below it, the gorge accelerates the wave. By the time it exits the gorge and strikes the valley floor where Longarone stands, It is 70 meters tall and moving at 90 kilometers per hour.